Thanks for being with us on the show. Very happy to have you here. And let me start by asking you that you were one of the top 50 corporate venture leaders and the only one from India. So, how did this interest in venture capital come about? Because you've done your engineering, and most of the people do their MBA, but very few end up into the private equity venture capital world, at least at the time when you did it. So tell me about your journey so far, step by step, as to what piqued your interest into the investment space.
It's a long journey. Where do we start? Yeah, you're right. I mean, in India, I think you're told the only way to make it to the top is get your engineering and MBA, and life will figure out itself.
Yeah.
I also did the same. I followed the playbook. I did my engineering and MBA. I didn't plan for 2009, but I passed out in 2009. It was the worst of the time for anyone to be graduating out of a business school.
Yeah.
And when I passed out, I think the idea was to be an investment banker, because everyone said that's the fastest way to make money and that's what you should do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So I also, after a bit of corporate finance, chose that path. But I think investment banking, either you're made for it or you're not made for it. I think I quickly knew within 2 years that
How did you say that?
I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, because sometimes I'm selling things I don't believe in.
Oh,
I have very little skin in the game. I'm basically a person carrying the bag. That's about it.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't want to do that. I wanted to have my skin in the game. I wanted to be more thought through. I wanted to believe in things I was working on.
But do you get to do that in boutique investment firms?
Absolutely, right? When you move from, say, sell side to buy side, you are much more, I would say, thought through, because you have a lot of skin in the game. The upside is really about investing in companies you believe in, working with them, and ensuring they reach the end goal.
Yeah.
While as a banker, you are very transactional. Your end goal is really to maximize the outcome at that point of time.
Yeah. But I was asking, like in boutique investment banking firms also, that's the case?
I mean, the only way to keep, I guess, the shop running is you need to make money.
Yeah.
And the only way you make money is when you make transactions happen.
Yeah, which are not.
Which sometimes you
favor
believe in,
also.
sometimes you don't,
Yeah.
right? It's not all, it's a hit or a miss. So I think which is why I said either you do it for the rest of your life or quickly you realize that maybe you're not meant for it. I think for me, I quickly realized I wasn't meant for it. And I wanted to do something else.
How many years did it take for you to realize?
I think a very, very short stint. I did it for 2 to 3 years and I was very clear I didn't want to do it.
Okay.
Of course, being in Bangalore, you have the exposure to how technology ecosystem is really sort of building for the next wave of large companies.
Yeah.
And then if you are more a global citizen, you understand what's happening across the world. And I think in 2014, it had become quite clear that India was a tipping point.
Yeah.
That next 10, 20, 30 years are about the Indian startup
Correct.
technology ecosystem, the kind of talent which had started coming to India, the fund business had started. In fact, when I started the industry, I tell people there used to be 10 BC funds I could count on my fingers.
Which ones?
I mean, those are the usual suspects, the large
Okay.
ones which had set shop in India.
Not the domestic funds.
Yeah, there were not too many homegrown emerging managers. It was a very small industry. You entered a room, you knew 95% of the room.
Yeah, yeah.
Today, you enter any room, you know probably 5% of the room. The industry has exploded. So I think the writing was on the wall. I saw the writing on the wall, but I wasn't very thought through about it. Maybe I should have been, maybe not. In one of the conversations, I was pitching a deal to Qualcomm Ventures.
Yeah.
And the person on the other side said, look, you understand finance, you are technology, you seem smart, very smart and sharp. Why don't you just move to the other side of the table? So it was just serendipity. It was never thought through.
Okay.
I knew I didn't want to do investment banking, but I was toying with a lot of ideas. I was toying with the idea of maybe I should do something more on the philanthropy side, maybe on the NGO side, maybe on the grant, maybe on the foundation. But again, I think everything that you were looking, you were not sure if they were scalable enough.
Yeah.
But when this opportunity came that, well, you can invest in startups which could become large scalable organizations over time, and imagine the huge impact you will create along the journey, I think it just struck a chord.
Okay.
And it was a very easy transition.
And how long did you take to decide that you will switch?
I think not more than a day. I mean, it was clear that this is what I wanted to
Wow,
do.
that quick.
Yeah. And because I love technology, and Qualcomm Ventures was really at the helm of technology. Today, the reason we are all thriving on what we call digital India today, or the first leapfrog or second leapfrog that happened in India, which is digitization, is on the power of smartphones. It
Right.
was being built by Qualcomm.
Oh, nice. And then when you became a part of the Qualcomm Ventures team, you've spent 7 years there. So tell me how
8+ years.
Oh,
Yeah.
tell me, how did your first year look like? What kind of deals were you working on? And then how did you gradually, become a leader there in the organization?
I think the best way to learn is throw people at the deepest end of water, and that's what happened to me. I joined the firm. We were two
With
people.
or without the float?
Yeah, I mean, more often than not, it's without the float, because then you learn it faster and better. And I was a third person. We had a very small portfolio then, because we were still figuring out India. And
So
I
only
joined.
3 people in the team.
Yeah, and then writing was on the wall. The tailwind had started happening. Global capital had started arriving in India. We started doing more deals, and I came from the other side, which was I had never invested in startups. I understood financial modeling. I understood technology, but I didn't know how to start processing in a way that everything looked fascinating.
Okay.
I would fall in love with every entrepreneur I would meet.
Yeah.
And I think over time you have to sort of learn the art and science of how to cut through the noise
Yeah.
and how to ensure what bubbles to the top, and that's where you start investing and you start thinking about how do I create large outcome and scale. While every story is fascinating, how do you ensure that you invest in stories which stand out from the others?
And how did you learn that art of choosing?
I think it was hard earlier. I had the constant feedback I used to get is stop falling in love with your companies, don't catch falling knives. And I think I had a great mentor and a boss. I used to work with this gentleman called Karthi Madaswamy.
Okay.
And
From Qualcomm.
yeah, and he basically was the mentor guide, which is why I always tell the younger generation over index on people you work with versus firms you work with. Because I mean, brands are great, but actually people, if they invest in you, nurture you and grow you, I think that's the fastest way to learn. I had the fastest learning curve because here was this gentleman who believed in me, and he threw me at the deepest end, and he said, I know you'll figure it out. And I did.
Okay. Got it. And then you said that you fell in love with every entrepreneur. So which was the first deal that you cracked and finally said, okay, this is the only one that I'll invest in out of so many?
Yeah. So my first deal, which is still very close to my heart, is a company called Move and Sing. It's run by Deepesh and Akash. And there were these two entrepreneurs who started their journey way before carpooling became fancy, that let's save the planet, let's ensure more people are put in a car, and let's have carpooling as an option. Of course, way ahead of time, digitization hadn't arrived so much in India. So they pivoted to a company which started selling to all large corporates employee transportation solution. Again, their eureka moment was clearly that at any large corporate, we don't realize it when you think about P&L, the largest item is employee salaries and the second largest in India is employee transportation. Because you're ferrying your employees and their call centers and their night shifts and their service businesses. And then they just said, look, it is criminal that for every employee there is one vehicle going. For every 2 employees you're doing 50 kilometers while you could have done in 30 kilometers. Let's just use pure play engineering, operations, research and solve for this by optimization. They started charging companies a certain amount of SaaS revenue, and that this is also before SaaS became fancy. So they sort of started figuring out how to ensure you charge companies per employee, per trip. Now they've become a huge business, but that was the first company I invested in where I saw power of technology to sell to large Indian corporates, which were still not used to the idea of paying for software.
Right. And did you ask them how are they so ahead of time?
I think this is where you need time and patience to spend time with some of these founders. I think my biggest learning has been the more time you spend with founders, you get under their skin, you understand what they are building for, what their purpose is and what is their end goal. Because everyone has different reasons for starting up. I mean, it could be a pure passion project, it could never scale up. It could be a way of making quick money and then they will never generate shareholder return. But if you're actually a thought through entrepreneur, you're thinking about this big, hairy, audacious goal and you're methodical about it, that's the ones you want to get.
Right. And did you source this deal? Or
yes, I worked with my partner on this, and I'm still very much in touch with those founders. And that was my first deal, so of course close to heart.
And any deal at Qualcomm which you found by yourself, worked on it, and ended up
So
investing?
most of them, right? So Qualcomm, we were a very lean team.
Huh.
I often told people, I'm the janitor, I'm the board of director.
Yeah.
Which means you are opening the shop every day, you're shutting the doors
Ah.
every day. And also you basically learn as much as you put in the system because there is so much to do. There are so many great entrepreneurs to work with. You actually decide which entrepreneurs you want to work with and help them scale. And again, I think India at that point of time, you had started seeing companies come from different walks of life. So, for example, I invested in a company called Ninja Cart,
Yeah.
which built the largest fresh fruit and vegetable supply chain. The other company I invested in was Stellabs, which was digitizing the whole dairy ecosystem. India, again, these are like fundamentally large GDP contributors, fruits
Right.
and vegetables. Milk is the largest crop today. The third company was Shadowfax, which is doing hyper-local delivery. Again, it
Yeah.
was clear that, look, we are moving to a world where we need instant gratification. We are moving to an app-only world. The deliveries are going online. Most people cannot have their own fleet doing this because it's not an optimized enough delivery ecosystem.
Yeah.
People order grocery during mornings, during afternoon they get their e-commerce deliveries, during night they're ordering food. How do you ensure it's optimized through the day by one common platform?
Yeah.
So I think that's how you start. Basically, it then becomes more about macro, large market, great teams, and then of course this
Yeah.
is like I'm not saying anything new, but you need to find the right combination of founder and the team
Right.
and the product market fit and the large opportunity that they're going after.
Yeah. Like you said, choose the people over the organization. Likewise, choose the founder over the business, because
Yeah.
that's how it will scale. And so you also invested in Reverie, right, which got sold to Reliance.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that deal. How did that happen?
Yeah, so Reverie again, very, very interesting, and Arvind is a dear friend and entrepreneur. And he did a fabulous job for all stakeholders, sold the company to Reliance.
Yeah.
Again, very ahead of its time, right? His idea was that, look, we are in a country which has so many languages. While English is the common language, we are talking about 0.1%, 1% of the nation, right? Which is that English speaking
Yeah.
audience. There is a lot of digital natives who are still vernacular in nature. Imagine an era which is now today that everyone is coming online.
Yeah.
And this, the founder thought 10 years back, right? That an era where everyone is online who's digitally, vernacularly native,
Yeah.
how do I ease the process?
Yeah.
So let me start building Indic languages online. And that's what he did, right? And he hit a gold mine and the rest is history.
Yeah. I mean, why did Reliance want to acquire?
I think Reliance acquired at them at a point when they had this whole string of pearls sort of strategy, if you will, right?
Okay.
They were investing in chatbot businesses to help consumers online. They were investing in various businesses, grocery, furniture, and education, and everything else, right? They were acquiring a lot of these companies. And while you're doing a lot of these acquisitions, you're going digital, someone has to enable that digital native
Yeah.
who's vernacular. So Reverie sort of was a perfect stitching point to stitch all these
Got
companies
it.
together.
Were there any bidders also apart from Reliance for the deal?
The company was growing well,
Yeah.
and had a lot of options because it had hit a gold mine.
Understood. And if I were to ask you, like, which were some of the most challenging deals at Qualcomm where you really had to put your head down to it to get the deal done?
I mean, they always say, right, if everyone is saying agreeing to a deal, it may not be the best deal because it might become common sense.
Yeah.
I think there were a lot of deals which had to be contextualized to India. So I think the beauty of working with Qualcomm was it was a global IC.
Yeah.
So you would be every day learning what's happening in China, what's happening in Israel, what's happening in US, what's happening in Europe. And of course there is India, which is this mass of land with 20% of world population. And then one day you have to suddenly go and tell them, oh, by the way, demonetization happened in India and these are the repercussions and these are the slew of companies which will show up. It was always an exercise in education. And then one day you'll have to tell them why a shadow fact should happen and they'll say, why in US nobody pays for delivery, in US nobody gets good groceries delivered at home. And then you have to contextualize everything to a country which is our size.
Yeah.
So it was always this tussle of why it works here versus not there, or what works there will not. So again, I think a lot of people try to do, well, it worked in Valley, will it work here? Or let's do models which look familiar in US, let's invest in them in this country. Actually, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
India is a very different country just by the sheer size and volume and the diversity we have, which means you have to think about very local problems and solve them locally. So at one point of time, I remember we used to have this company which would help people do phone recharges offline. Nobody would do that in US.
Yeah.
You'd never have offline recharge stations. But for us to explain why it was important in India to ensure more people buy smartphones was an exercise in itself, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of this had to be contextualized to India,
Understood.
which was an interesting thing because you also learn in the process
Yeah.
and also you start making more believers.
Right. And like sometimes the founders choose their investors rather than vice versa. The cap table where you had to convince the founder hard enough that choose us and not the other.
You know, my job was easier because I used to work for this large technology giant called Qualcomm. Everybody knew Qualcomm.
Yeah.
Everybody knew the power of technology and they knew how the businesses. I mean, one of my favorite ways to explain this to people is there would have been no Uber or Google Maps had there been no Qualcomm because there would have been no smartphones.
Correct.
Which means all of us would still be looking at our digital maps and going across the world in a taxi.
Yeah.
So what we really did to the world is we brought the power of technology in little palms of hands of everyone. So every entrepreneur knew that if I would have access to this giant which had every possible technology research happening and I could be part of this universe, there's immense value add.
Yeah.
And I think that's where founders are very, very discerning now versus I would say 10, 15 years back, where they choose their partners to know which partners they want to work with. And I've had cases where there have been large global majors and large global funds on the same cap table as me because the founders knew that, well, while money looks the same color, there is some money which is always more value additive than others.
Yeah. So you had the advantage of the corporate name of Qualcomm. Understood. And then let me ask you about the most curious question as to what made you then switch to Avana Capital if everything was going well and good. The deals were nice, the founders were exciting, the time was good. What was it that made you switch?
I think I could have retired from Qualcomm if you ask me. It's a great place.
Okay, which was like 5 years back.
I mean, I could have retired in the sense that I could have worked there for next 30 years. Right? But I think after a while, the comfort becomes discomforting. The machinery was well oiled, it was working very well, we had good deal flow, we were able to work with best of entrepreneurs. But I think somewhere it became sort of nagging that now what? And the now what also along the journey, I joined this very prestigious program called Kaufman Fellows, which is this network of global VCs across the world where you get to learn a lot from each other as to how to build firms, how to build partnerships, how to build the best team that you're working with, how to ensure that you have the best portfolio construction, etc. Right? How do you become basically the gold standard in VC firm in your market? And out of those conversations, it became very, very clear that I started seeing great emerging managers. And in India, I think for a long time, we have had the global marquee majors who have come and we have had a few homegrown VC firms. But the market, unlike US and Europe or China also, is not very huge in terms of number of small emerging. There are a lot of micro VCs, but there are not a lot of established 100, 200 million homegrown VCs. Still, so there was a huge gap. And when I went to Kaufman, I realized that it's a hard journey. No journey is easy. I mean, it's an entrepreneurial journey at the end of the day, but it's not impossible if you have the right team, the right track record, the right thesis, and your heads down doing what you're doing. The second was, I think I started talking to a lot of climate VCs in my global network. There were a lot of these emerging managers from Voyager to Contrarian to Congruent to 2150. And I think when I started looking at India deep enough, I realized that there was nobody really singularly mindedly focusing on climate. It became quite clear that we had to do climate, someone had to do it.
Why do you think India didn't have enough people in climate?
I think it's always about flavor of the season. Someone has to lead the charge. Someone has to understand the space and build it. I mean, before Converse started D2C Fireside, nobody was even thinking about it, right? And then after that, every firm started talking about it. So someone has to lead the charge. And maybe it was our job to lead the charge. Along the journey, of course, met Anjali. I mean,
How did you happen to meet her?
I know her for 4 or 5 years. We have been sort of dating each other that we should do something together. but I think there is always a timing to it. And I think it became clear to both of us that we wanted to do something in climate. We wanted to work together. And I think Anjali was the tipping point where I said, look, I have to do this. I have to do it with someone outstanding, someone I can really work with.
Yeah.
And Savannah happened.
Okay. And then when you joined Avana's team, what kind of differences did you observe in Avana versus at Qualcomm? Because both are so different in their size, structure,
Yeah.
and the kind of deals they do.
No, it's very interesting, and this is what I share with a lot of people. Actually, when you're building a fund, you don't realize you're actually building a startup.
Yeah.
Because similar to entrepreneurs, you're raising capital, you're deploying capital, you're building a team, you are building a thought leadership in a space, you are convincing all the naysayers that this is what the next big opportunity
Yeah.
looks like. And the other thing which you don't realize is the biggest job is of being a salesperson. You're selling to your LPs, you're selling to your founders, you're selling to potential hirees for your own firm, for your founder's firm, for different stakeholders across the ecosystem. But while you are part of which is, I think, goes back to the earlier conversation we were having, do you want to build something or do you want to be part of something that is already built? I think Qualcomm was part of something which was a very, very well-oiled machinery. While we built India practice per se, but it was
The
a
name
very
was built.
well-oiled machinery. You had a finance function, you had a marketing function, you had a legal function, you knew how it worked across other geographies. You had a playbook.
Yeah.
Here you don't have a playbook. It's a blank canvas. You really decide your playbook. So I think the sheer joy of building and getting your hands dirty is very, very different. I think the second is just working with this clear sort of passion and purpose versus in a place where you're comfortable. The urgency is missing when you're comfortable, but when you're slightly uncomfortable that I have to do it, it is more about, I think, I don't like the word hustle because it has negative connotation. There's an entrepreneurial mood on.
Yeah.
So I think that's the difference. The energy is much more different.
Right. And now you work with a very lean team. So tell me about how did you hire your team and what kind of criteria do you look at while hiring at Avana?
You know, I always tell people it's all about the intrinsics. If I find a great candidate, I mean, resumes are a great way to filter. You will have some key check boxes and you can look at that and meet candidates.
But
I always look at reference. If someone tells me this is a great candidate, I forget the check boxes, I meet a candidate. And all I look for is honestly intellectual curiosity and ability to be a sponge, because this business is about intellectual curiosity. If you're intellectually curious, you know how to think about next technology, how to interact with those founders, how to continue to learning, because this is the only business where at one point of time you are, I don't know if you've read this book called Deep Work.
No,
it's a great book, you should. And it is about how VC is a business where you can't do deep work. You're doing like 10,000 things at the same time. You're at one point of time researching what's happening in packaging industry, second time hydrogen industry, third time something in the materials industry. And you have to ensure that you have this block period of time where you're doing these things. And then also processing hundreds and thousands of entrepreneurs at any point of time and ensuring something bubbles to the top. And then you focus more energy on that. So you're doing so many things at together. So what I want in this person is this person can actually think about it, multi-process, have the intellectual curiosity to move from one thing to the other seamlessly.
Got it.
And learning is not hard. If you have the right intrinsics, you can do it. Also, I think what I look for is a high level of ownership. Think about it as my firm versus Avana. At the moment you have it as that it's my firm that I am building, I think it just becomes easier to build it thinking it's your own. How you think about anything which belongs to you versus you're part of it is always different.
Correct. Yeah, that's so true. But do you think that being a VC makes you more of a generalist, at least in the initial stages of your career?
Explain that. What do you mean by that?
As in you're doing everything a little and not going deeper into anything one.
Yeah, and that's a boon and the bane, right? You're learning so much, but you need to also ensure to compartmentalize. So you need to have a very thought through thesis, which is what we want to avoid being a generalist.
Got it.
And we have chosen climate as our theme. So I mean, we could be doing 10,000 other things, but we're okay to say let go next Freshworks and Flipkart for the joy of doing, say, the next Tesla in the country. Because we will go deep in, and today, for example, we invested in a solar company called Aram.
Yeah.
And for doing Aram, I think we looked at 30 plus solar space companies. We published 2-part blogs to seed the ecosystem, to think about what could happen in solar and invested in this company. And that we continue to do across spaces.
Yeah.
So we like a space, we know something is going to happen. Sometimes we seed ideas in that space to see a entrepreneur starting to come up.
Yeah.
At Avana, what we do is we run office hours so that we can meet founders. We are looking at a certain space. We run podcasts where we get a lot of global folks to talk about areas we are thinking about it and get the local ecosystem to think
What
about
is the podcast name?
So we run this something called Avana Climate Corner.
Okay.
Under Avana Climate Corner, we run our city mixer. So basically, no agenda, various cities. We will just have a casual place like this.
Yeah.
Get people to show up and just talk climate. They could be researchers, policymakers, entrepreneurs, lawyers. Who
Yeah.
cares? Just talk about climate and something will come out here. Maybe you'll find your next co-founder.
Right.
Maybe I'll find my next founder. Who knows, right? Then we do this series of fireside chats just like
Yeah.
this with global experts, because again, I think they've heard enough from local community, but I think the access to the global community is not there, which
Yeah.
I think with Anjali, my background, we are able to easily access people from different parts of the world and get them to talk locally about what's happening in their parts of the world. Then we of course run our Medium blogs. We are part of a lot of these similar conversations to get people to hear our story and talk about areas we are focused on.
Understood. And which was your first deal at Avana Capital?
So we work on a lot of deals and we don't have like this my deal versus your deal.
Yeah.
It's a very tag team approach. So far we have done from fund to, we have invested in 2 companies, Aram and Eiki Foods. Eiki Foods is basically future of food production.
Okay.
So if you think about 1.4 billion population in the country, they need to be fed every day. We're not talking about avocados, arugula's and caves. That's just another problem to solve, and I let someone else solve for. I want to ensure that every day Bhartiya gets his tomato, bhindi, karela. How do you do this? So this company Eiki Foods in deserts of Rajasthan has built this patented food production system, polymer technology, and in that they are growing everyday vegetables at everyday prices. So it's harshest condition, right? The temperatures could be -0 plus 40 degrees and still they're able to grow. Water is not there, it's non-arable land. So they proved it. Now they're scaling to other parts of the world.
Okay.
So Eiki, Aram, there are 3 more in progress which will be shortly announced, and the portfolio continues to grow.
Understood. And like you said about that solar company which you were mentioning, you end up sometimes doing more research than the founder themselves. So do you think it is like a red flag if the founder doesn't know something about their own industry which the investor does?
I don't know if founder doesn't know typically what we know. We look at a lot, we understand more. Sometimes we'll know more about the global perspective. Sometimes we will have a different perspective. But if we invest in a founder, typically he is the subject matter expert in that space, right? He will know what more than others. But what works for us is the founder loves us because we know what he's doing, and we are not coming out of somewhere and saying, oh, by the way, what means this, what means that. And we have heard this from so many founders that we would love to work with you because we don't have to explain it to you.
Correct.
So I think that helps, but I don't think we are subject matter experts. I think we read a lot, we understand a lot, and we're partners with entrepreneurs in their journey. But of course, if an entrepreneur is building heads down in a certain space, he should, and he definitely should know more than us about his space.
Yeah. So since we spoke of this, just extending this question to also, what is the founder checklist that you look for? What pedigree of founders would you want to back?
I don't think we have a checklist. We have founders who have just come out of IITs building, founders who have failed in past ventures, founders who have pivoted, founders who were bankers themselves in the past. So I mean, there is founders who were product managers. I don't think there is a checkbox. I think again the intrinsic, is this a founder I can work with? Is this founder who's very clear on what he wants to build? Of course, that can change along the journey, but at least today at this point of time. And is this a founder who is very cautious about how he builds the company, is not using capital as a mode, but technology as a mode? Is he capable of building scalable company? Is he capable to hire right? Because again, I feel the job of a founder is basically again a salesperson job. He's selling to investors, to his co-founders, to his employees, to his potential customers.
Yeah.
is this person continue to do that for the rest of his life?
Understood. And do you see enough women founders in the space you are, which is climate and tech?
We do, and I'm sure we see more than our fair share versus our peers, because I think a lot of it is about diversity. You end up in similar networks. So, I mean, of course, my Shruti and Anjali's network are very different from each other. Shruti comes from my investment partner, comes from a very different background than mine, which is mine is more corporate. We see she has been more in the IFC acumen spaces before this, understands ESG impact better than anybody else in the country. So again, Anjali's background is more McKinsey, Spencer Stuart, corporate systems of the country, and technology investing in large companies. So all of us have very different backgrounds and networks. So you leverage our networks, and of course, given the function that we are women, there are more women in our network also. So our network being different, and also we being women, of course, we get to see more women versus what our peers would see.
Yeah. So do you think like having a women leader at the top gets in more women founders?
Absolutely. I mean, there is no denying that, because I mean, one of the things a lot of people ask is, how did three of you come together, Shruti, you and Anjali? Because our network was that, right? That's the people we spend more time with, and hence there was comfort to work with each other.
Yeah. Understood. And do you think that the way women founders pitch, at least at the early stages, of course, later on they learn along the path, is it a bit different than the male entrepreneurs?
Absolutely. I think women generally have a tendency to self-doubt more than the men, undersell themselves, which is why I think you always need a partner in crime who should be able to sell you better than you do in case you're not. I mean, there are so many instances where if you ask them, same room, right, a man and a woman to introduce themselves, a man can go on for 10 minutes while women may just stop in 1 minute, and their credentials may be equally or maybe better, right? But it's just a function of how women are generally find it hard to sort of self-praise or share more about themselves.
Why do you think is that the case? And
I think it's just a need. I think over time you start realizing where the flaws in the system are, right? And you start working towards it.
So where do you think are the flaws?
Flaws is, I think, just in the nurturing, right, where we need to tell each other and we need to be each other's champion in some sense, right? Which is why there is this whole concept of pay it forward, right? I am a function today of the mentors I have had in my life. I continue to nurture the next set of generations. So, for example, at Qualcomm, I saw this huge gap of why I'm not seeing enough women founders.
Yeah.
I started this program called Queen, which is Qualcomm Women Entrepreneurs India Network. Now it's 3rd year running, and I'm glad the program is still alive after I'm gone. Which was basically, can I every year get 10 to 15 women entrepreneurs which are building for deep technologies, and get 1 or 2 Qualcomm mentors, Qualcomm senior leaders to work with them. Because honestly, a lot of these women don't have the network that their male peers might have. So you need to give them that power of network.
And how did you decide to initiate this kind of a network? What triggered it?
I think just the same thing we're discussing, right? The funnel still is distorted towards male population versus women population. There are great women engineers.
Yeah.
Why are there not great women founders?
Right. But do you see more applications at Avana?
We do. Because again, I think our networks are similar, right? If my friend is starting, the chances I will know more about her starting before others.
Got it. And since you deal in climate and sustainability, what are some of the key trends that you're observing? Some of the white spaces that you think are still not fulfilled?
I think the entire spectrum is a white space. I think there's been a lot of conversations and momentum around electric vehicle, etc. So I think that is well-oiled machinery, I would say. But there's so much more which can happen around energy transition. And by that, what I mean is, while we're deploying enough solar and wind or whatever, how do you ensure there is energy storage, energy distribution, the grid is decentralized? There's so much which can happen around building materials, right? We'll continue to build more buildings. We need to make them more environment friendly. We know steel is a big major contributor. We know in the agriculture, water, 80% of water is used in agriculture. Water tables are depleting. How do we solve for that? How do we solve for waste? So there are a lot of large, big other problem statements that we need to solve for. And there are enough and more white spaces where we've started seeing entrepreneurs coming up now.
Got it. And so far, which sector do you see more founder population in from the categories that you
That's what
just
I'm saying. I
mentioned?
think there's a lot been done around electric vehicles because I think with India's policy and regulatory regime and the funding capital available, entrepreneurs have built enough and more capital. It's a well-oiled machinery. But there are recycling, for example, when we think about circularity, there is so much which can be done around recycling, right?
Yeah.
Instead of accumulating piles and piles of disposal and garbage.
Right. Have you come across any company
We're
which is
looking at a
doing
lot.
food waste?
We're looking at a lot. I think again for us, there are two things which are very important, right? A, there has to be a way to scale it. You can build mini waste bins everywhere, but if it's not scalable,
Yeah.
then they are better suited to do it without VC capital. Because I also have a responsibility to my LPs
Correct.
to return great returns.
How do you think the scalability can be achieved? What
I
are
think
three,
use
four
of technology.
parameters?
What I have learned over my 10 years of investing is operational businesses are very hard to scale. But if you use technology as a moat, you can be an overnight scale, right? I mean, think about it. I mean, my favorite example is when Uber entered India.
Yeah.
It had 0 people on the ground. Of course, India is a very high touch market, and over time they had to get people and deploy. But when it entered India, it entered with 0 people. It
Yeah.
entered with an app.
Right. So technology is something that can make you cross borders, and overnight is something that you
Yeah,
can do
absolutely, you can
successfully.
scale, right? You have a technology and you can continue to multiply it over
Yeah,
and over
yeah.
again.
Understood. And I'm sure that you were a part of the fundraising journey at Avana as well, and you said it's an entrepreneurial journey in itself. So, what do you think the LPs look at the fundraisers, and what kind of pedigree should any GP have to run or start a VC fund if they want to?
I don't think there's a one size fits all. I think when people are deploying their capital, all they care about is can this person be trusted with my money? That is part one. Once I trust this person with my money, this person can they multiply the money for me. It's as simple, right? Pure 101 maths. And when we talk to our LPs, I think what I can't speak for others, but I think our LPs love the fact that we are these 3 women who have been leaders in our own various spheres of life. We have been investing in climate before it became too fancy for last 20, 15, 20 years. In our personal capacity, we have created so much value across our past organization. So they know we can continue to create that. Of course, they can trust us with our money. And the third is really, will they be able to find outliers? Because VC business is a game of outliers.
Right.
It's the only job which pays you to make mistakes in some sense, right? All you need to do is find 10 large companies which will be 10 large fund returns for
Yeah.
the firm. And that's what I think an LP is evaluating you is, will they be able to find those outliers?
Understood. So, what's our investment thesis now? How big is our fund at Avana?
So Avana is about, I think it's going to be about 1,000 crore odd vehicle.
Okay.
The depth of the market demands that, and we'll do about 20 to 25 investments over next 4 to 5 years.
And what's the ticket size?
We will always be a pre-series A investor in some sense. So the comfort is in writing.
$1 to $5 million.
Yeah, I would say an average check size of 2 to 3 million, where we have 15 to 20%. Work with the founders really deep in the trenches is where the comfort is.
Understood. And just taking a step back, you mentioned about your mentors as well at Qualcomm. So, what were some of the leadership qualities that you adopted from them, which you today use as a leader?
I think empowerment. If you empower people, you can make wonders happen. Because I think everyone loves the feeling of, can you trust me with something? And if you trust me with something, if I can deliver it, that's where magic happens, right? So if I give you something, you're empowered enough, and I'm not really a bottleneck in that journey, I think you can just thrive and grow as an organization. So I mean, my biggest learning has been the power to empower.
Okay, understood. But with that, we come to the rapid fire round. I have a few questions there.
Okay.
So starting with, which were some of the most important questions that you asked yourself when you started your career, and that you also ask now?
Honestly, I was an idiot when I started my career because I thought that I will be an investment banker for the rest of my life. But I think over time it became crucial that what do you drive energy from? It became very, very clear to me that I drove energy from startup entrepreneurs, learning every day, working with them. And that's when it became clear to me that I know for the rest of my life, I want to work with startups and entrepreneurs in whatever capacity I can. And venture capital was the easiest and natural transition because I was a finance professional and I over time have somehow learned the art and science of how to multiply, how to find the right founders. So I think that's became more a journey, but I think it became clearer 4 or 5 years that I wanted to work in the startup ecosystem.
Okay. And what were some of the most important questions, if three of them, that you were asked?
I was asked
Yeah.
by who?
By anyone, could be your previous boss, the founders, Anjali, anyone.
I mean, depend on the context, and I'm just thinking what are the question. I guess the question is, do you want to do it for the rest of your life? The question could be, how do you know which founders to invest in? The question could be, what are the next big trends that you see?
Yeah. But I don't think so. Those are difficult. It's just like a part of your job.
Yeah, I mean, difficult question is what? Are you willing to bet your personal money on this? For example, if I would take a deal to IC and they would say, look, we are not sold. Would you be willing to bet your own personal money on this? And then you'd have to really sort of bang the table to say, look, I really believe in this company. And that's where conviction comes in sometimes.
Yeah. Since you mentioned about IC and we all know how difficult is it there as the world thinks it's not the same. So can you mention other questions that critical ones that you get asked by the IC?
Are you willing to bet your career on this, for example, right? Because sometimes while VC business does pay you to make mistakes, it does leave a lot of scars, right? There are some things you believe in and then they might just backfire completely.
Correct.
So are you sometimes willing to bet your life on something because you believe in it so much?
Yeah.
Are you willing to back yourself up?
Right. Next one is like, which were the early influences in your life?
Honestly, I mean, the India I grew up, I come from a very lower middle class family. I'm a Marwadi.
Okay.
I mean, education is not number one criteria on anyone's mind, neither is career. So I think breaking through those barriers and growing up I think my tipping moment was when I left home to do my engineering, and then I got sort of surrounded by this really super smart peers or friends and started understanding the world better from their lens as to what opportunities and career really look like. I think MBA was another place where again I met really smart, bright individuals to understand how they were thinking about their career trajectory. If you think about role models in India I grew up in, there were very few.
Yeah.
I still think for one of my interviews I was asked, I think FMS interview itself, I was asked, they used to have this extempore concept and I had it on 8th March and they said Women's Day. And I started talking about Women's Day and the only women I could think about was at that point of time was Indra Nooyi, Kiran Majumdar Shaw, one or two, and then it went straight to Rani Lakshmibai, right? Because there was not enough in the corporate world that you could think about it. But of course, it has multiplied manifold in last 15 years. It has been transformative and the number of trailblazers that you have seen.
So who's your role model now?
I mean, to me, I think when I think about how the world has sort of, Mary Meeker, for example, right? She is the gold standard. Every year people look forward to her in internet trends report. I mean, people wait for that day in the year when she'll publish it, right? People have really built their career in this industry and have thrived and continue to pay it forward in some sense.
Understood. And then, since you spoke of impact, let me also ask you that, is there something that you want to be remembered for?
I mean, honestly, at this point of time, I think all I want to do is heads down. We want to build Avana, and not me personally, but I think Avana as a firm which really brought climate tech investing front and center on the canvas of India, and we built large global companies from India.
What does the name Avana mean?
Avana is a play on the Sanskrit word called Avahan, which means call for action.
Okay.
So I think very serendipitous in the sense of how we are asking climate as the next big problem statement to solve for. And I think my really the ambition is to build that Avana as that franchisee which everyone looks up to as the climate gold standard.
Yeah, that's right. But a lot of VCs have this confusion in the mind that can we name our fund Sanskrit, because what if it becomes global funds, global LPs won't understand. But I think it's the opposite. They love to know more about
I would stay close to our
Yeah.
culture. I would definitely stay close to our culture because we should be proud of it and the fact that, I mean, honestly, the world can't ignore us anymore.
Hmm.
We are 20% of the world population. We have the best tech talent, some of the best companies building for the world.
Yeah. That's right. And what were some of the key challenges you faced so far in your 20-year odd years of career?
I think that's where I think I always tell others, I don't want this to be a soapbox or any conversation to be a soapbox. I think because everything is a learning opportunity. So I think very early on in my career, I realized I had a very strong relationship driven approach in life. And I invested a lot in my relationships. I early on realized that there was a very small network of women which could I really build strong relationships. So you had to get out of your comfort zone and build it with a larger ecosystem. I mean, I am the one who would reach out to people and build relationship versus the other way, because I think given we are only 10% of the room, why would someone reach out to us to build relationship versus they have 90%, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes you have to do that extra effort. So I think if you realize that what are the bottlenecks in your journey and you sort of work through them, they don't remain challenges.
Right.
They're just basically every day how do you build better,
Yeah.
how do you become better at
Yeah,
what
in
you do.
hindsight, it becomes learnings.
Yeah. So I actually don't call them challenges. I just feel that no journey is easier. All you need to realize is what are the bottlenecks and you need to figure out a way to circumvent those.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was the most important learning you got from Kaufman? I'm sure that you still are into the learning
Yes,
phase
I mean,
there.
I'm still in the trenches. I think my biggest learning was everyone has a story. The fact is that while it seems from the outside a very glamorous job because you're investing in startups and these startups are in newspaper, it's actually a very, very humbling journey to build long standing institutions. How do you build the team? How do you select the portfolio? And there is a lot which you can draw upon other people's experience of what not to do. So there's a lot of value in having those conversations and not shying away from asking if you have a problem statement. So for example, I have a board which I just don't know how to navigate because there's this one board member who's just not easy to deal with.
Yeah.
You can try in your own way, or you can ask 5 people who have had similar situations and learn from them, which is where the power of network comes.
Yeah, that's true. And since you talked about power, let me also ask you a question around negotiation. Sometimes the founders may not agree with the terms that the investors have, and vice versa as well. So, has there been any time so far in your career of investing where you had some tough negotiations on any particular clause in the term sheet?
I mean, look, the lawyer's job is to add value. So
Yeah.
lawyers will do what they have to do. I think it's about you and your founder's chemistry of how you want to work. Sometimes it's not about, I would say, crossing the T's and dotting the I's, but I think it's all about building that comfort and relationship with the founder. So, I mean, plus minus 5%, it should not be about an ego battle, but it's about can I build a long standing relationship with a certain founder or a certain collaborator. So I always look at some of these as relationship opportunities versus negotiation opportunities, because if it's a lose-lose or if it's a win-win, there is some stake involved. I think there is always that sort of conundrum, but if it's all about collaboration, I think that conundrum goes away. If there is no
Yeah.
winners or losers.
Yeah. No, of course that synergy happens, but has there been any example of a time where any one of you had to negotiate a bit?
I mean, sometimes I feel that if it's, and this is very personal, right? If I feel that if you're spending too much time unnecessary negotiating, maybe it's not worth it. Because if it's something where you both are working towards the same I mean, I've seen founders who take lower valuation just to work with you. Sometimes they would come and say, look, this is important to me and these are the 5 reasons this is important to me, and you will be willing to work with them. I think it's important when it's not about ego, but it's about rationality.
Yeah.
So which is why I think what my biggest learning is, if you make these conversations with more rational sort of conversations and logic, and not anchor it around ego or winning or losing, I think then it's just easier.
Yeah. Yeah, and for the benefit of our audience, if you could just, as an investor, mention some of the basic terms that the term sheet has for all the founders.
I think all founders really care about is how much am I going to dilute
Yeah.
in a certain round, how much am I getting valued at, because that really defines how I grow into my next set of milestones. And yeah, I think those are the 2 or 3 key things as a founder. How am I ensuring that I'm still at the helm and the charge of growing the company, scaling the company, and not being micromanaged? How do I ensure that I bring exit to the people? So because for all of us are fiduciary responsibilities, right? We as a fund have a life cycle. We would like to return returns to our stakeholders. So how do I ensure that I get exit to my investors?
So, did you get any exits from the fund one?
So fund one is very early. Yeah? It's only 3 years old. We're still
Or
raising fund
secondary
two.
exit?
I mean, there have been opportunities, but you as an investor, you know what is the right time to take money off the table. And typically, most of these startups, I think, not before 4th or 5th year, start to show that
Yeah.
returns or just start generating outcomes. And by the end of 10 years, they become outliers. So you want to ensure you have enough skin in the game, enough money at the table. So you always take that call at the right and appropriate time.
Yeah.
3 years is too early for anyone to start just for showing that returns to start taking money off the table, unless an M&A happens, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where you're forced to sort of
Correct.
work around that.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. And which has been your favorite childhood memory?
Childhood memory, I think summers, mangoes and summers.
It's there now.
It's right, and
Unfortunately, it rained yesterday in Bombay.
the climate is changing, which is why we need to solve for it. Yeah. I think which is something I miss right now is we are all on a treadmill. I mean, I would love to have times where there is enough time to deep think, sit with a book, read it, understand and absorb it. But through the earlier conversation we were happening, right? There's no time for deep work. There's no time to just sit and stare at horizon for like 5 hours, and then your boomerang movement happens.
Yeah.
I think that's my favorite. Just doing nothing, sit and stare at the horizon.
Okay. And which town do you hail from?
I grew up in Calcutta. So again, a very sleepy little town, right?
Huh.
Still stuck in time. So
Yeah.
I wish I could go stuck in time again.
Yeah. That's right. And lastly, any advice that you would want to give to any learner in any field of work?
I always tell this to my analysts. The only thing in life important is be a sponge. No job is big or small. Just be a sponge. Take whatever life throws at you. Do not question yourself whether you can do it or not. You'll figure out a way. Just get thrown at the deepest end.
And that's your job to do it.
Yeah, just get thrown at the deepest end and you will figure out how to swim.
Got it. But thanks a lot for sharing all your insights and giving us time. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. And I'm sure you must have had a great time too.
No, absolutely. I mean, some of the questions, childhood memory, etc., really took me back in time. And I think these conversations help you also think and ponder as to how
Yeah.
the journey has been, how the next few years look like.
Right.
You also, the
Helps
same.
you pause and reflect
Yeah.
from the
Sometimes these are important for that.